Yo, what's up guys? It's Noah here, and in today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the Week 13 NFL slate on Draftkings and Yahoo. Going to break down this slate position by position like we always do, quarterback through tight end. We'll talk about the guys that I had the most interest in at each position. Like always, we're not going to talk about every single player on the slate just because I don't want this video to be too long. I'm really just going to hit on the guys that I had the most interest in, that I'm going to have the most exposure to across all of my lineups. So before we get started with the breakdown, as always, guys, I'd appreciate it if you hit that like button down below. If you are new to the channel, be sure to click the subscribe button as well. Click that notification bell so that way you do get notified every time I upload. If you do really enjoy my videos, if they help you out a lot and you want to get more content from me, you want to see more that I have to offer, you can check out my Patreon, link down below in the description. I do have a lot of additional content over on Patreon. I do articles over there. I give updated core plays for NBA, NFL, MLB. I pretty much break down all those three sports over on Patreon. So if you want to see more that I have to offer, check out the Patreon link down below. It's obviously optional, but for those of you that are interested, you can check that out. But yeah, guys, let's go ahead and take a look at this Week 13 main slate. We'll start off at quarterback like we always do. So at the top of the position, we got Russell Wilson as our most expensive quarterback this week. No Patrick Mahomes on the main slate, no Josh Allen on the main slate, which does leave Russ as our most expensive option. $7,700 in a matchup at home against the Giants. So the Giants, they've had a really good defense this year. They've actually been much better defensively than I thought they would have been. Russ, though, is a guy that's, I think, pretty much matchup proof at this point. I don't really care who he's going up against. He's one of the best quarterbacks in the league. He's one of the most efficient quarterbacks in the league. But there is a bit of a concern with, Seattle not throwing the ball as much as they have been, at the beginning of the year, or as they were at the beginning of the year. We've seen Russ's pass attempts, kind of trend down a little bit. 37 against the Rams, only threw the ball 28 times against Arizona. Last Monday night against Philly, only threw the ball 31 times. The Draftkings points, they've been kind of low as well. Just 12, 20, and 14 DK points in his last three games. There's obviously some concerns here. The Giants have a solid defense. They're also or Seattle at least, they're also 10.5 point favorites. So, this is a spot where you'd expect Seattle to be playing with a lead, probably going to run the ball, especially like late in the game. If there was ever a game for Seattle to just establish the run and just run the ball a ton, this is a spot where you would expect them to do so, given how big of favorites they are in this game. Me personally, I think I'd rather go down to Kyler Murray and Deshaun Watson over Russell Wilson this week. Maybe that's a hot take, but I know Kyler's been struggling as well, but I still love the upside that Kyler brings on a weekly basis. He hasn't been running as much recently, which is a bit of a concern. There were some reports that he was dealing with an injury, but it looked like he got in a full practice on Thursday. I'm not too worried about that injury heading into this game. I expect Kyler's going to be fully healthy. He really struggled last week against New England. I liked him a lot in tournaments. I thought he was going to be really low owned, and he was. He really disappointed with just 8.9 DK points, but I would expect a bounce back game from Kyler here. The Rams also have a really good defense. They've been one of the better defensive teams overall, but this is still a really good game environment. Pretty high total here, 48 implied total, 3-point spread favoring the Rams, so we're expecting a close game here. I don't see, Arizona having much success running the ball against this Rams front, so I do like Kyler quite a bit. I think, the upside that he brings with his rushing ability, and like I said, I know he hasn't been running as much the last few games, but this is still a guy that can legit go for 90, 100 rushing yards any week, can legit throw for 300 yards, give you the 100-yard rushing bonus, just has so much upside. We've seen Kyler go for over 40 Draftkings points multiple times this year. At 7,600, I prefer him over Russell Wilson this week. I think Kyler is one of my preferred pay-up options. And then Deshaun Watson is another guy that I like a lot as well. I know he lost Will Fuller. Will Fuller's suspended for the season. Randall Cobb is hurt. Kenny Stilton's no longer on the team. This Texans wide receiver core is not the same as it was at the beginning of the year. But Deshaun Watson is just such a talented quarterback. This is another guy that just has so much upside, can throw for 300-plus yards and multiple touchdowns, can give you some rushing upside as well. Not the same level that Kyler does, but still, Deshaun Watson can get 40, 50 rushing yards, can get rushing touchdowns. Like when they get down to the goal line, they'll let Deshaun Watson punch it in. I do like him a lot here against the Colts. I know the Colts are another solid defensive team, but yet again, we have a really good game environment here. High total, 51 implied total, pretty close 3.5 point spread. We're expecting a close game. Even if the Colts get a little bit of a lead, which honestly I hope they do because we want the Colts with a lead. We want the Texans playing from behind if we're playing Deshaun Watson. it seems like whenever the Texans are playing from behind, like that's when Deshaun Watson just, in terms of fantasy, that's just when he produces the most. Obviously, when they're playing from behind, they're going to throw more, but we've seen Deshaun, start off games really slow, and then in the second half, if they're playing from behind, if they're down a couple touchdowns, like we've seen Deshaun can just go for 20, 25 DK points and a half and still, hit value even if he struggles in the first half. But he hasn't been struggling lately. He's been playing really well. 34, 36 DK points his last two games. Really since like week 4 against Minnesota. I mean, he's been as good as it gets pretty much since Bill O'Brien got fired. Like you look at the game log. I know game log isn't everything, but 23, 29, 35, 27, 24. That Cleveland game, I'm kind of going to take that one and, kind of throw it out the window because there were some major weather concerns in that game. It was really, really windy. The teams weren't really able to throw the ball effectively in that game. You obviously saw that with it just being a 7-10 final score. You take out that game, and he's pretty much had like 24-plus DK points. Literally, since week 4, he scored like over 20 fantasy points. He's just been so consistent. We know the upside's there. High total game, great game environment in a dome. Like Deshaun Watson at 7,500. I don't know if people are going to want to pay that price tag for him, but he's one of my favorite QB options this week, and on Yahoo, I really like him over there. He's coming in a lot cheaper. I think he'll be more popular on Yahoo, but even so, like quarterbacks rarely see more than 20% ownership. Like if a quarterback winds up chalky, normally they're about 20% owned. Like we're not going to see quarterbacks be 40, 50% owned, at least not in tournaments. So I'm not too worried about the cheap price on Yahoo, even though he'll be a little bit popular. I'm still going to be pretty heavy on Deshaun Watson. $31, like that price tag a lot. Coming in cheaper than Aaron Rodgers, cheaper than Taysom Hill, cheaper than Herbert, Murray, Wilson. You do have Mahomes on the Yahoo main slate if you want to pay up for him, but I really like that $31 salary on Watson. Definitely stands out as one of the better QBs overall this week, at least in my opinion. I know people might be hesitant to go there because he's losing a lot of his receivers. He doesn't have as many weapons, but Watson can still produce even with, Randall Cott, or even with Brandon Cooks, even with Kiki Kuti as his top 2 receivers. Like he can still put up good numbers. He's just such a talented QB. So I really like Deshaun Watson. I think Deshaun and Kyler are definitely my 2 favorite spend-up quarterbacks overall. Aaron Rodgers I do like a lot at 6,800. Aaron Rodgers, another guy like Deshaun Watson. He's just been so consistent this season. Pretty much take out that Tampa Bay game, and he's had over 19 Draftkings points in every game this year. He's shown somewhat of a ceiling as well. Like he can go for 30-plus DK points. He can throw for 300-plus yards and 4 touchdowns. Like he's got that kind of upside in him. We've seen when the Packers get down to the goal line, like they are not handing it off to Aaron Jones, which, if you're someone that plays Aaron Jones, it's probably tilting to watch. But like when they get down to the goal line, they're throwing the ball. Aaron Rodgers is rolling out. They're running a bunch of just rollout plays. They're getting Devonta Adams the ball at the goal line. Like his touchdown equity is just so high right now. He's thrown for at least 3 touchdowns, I think, in like 5 straight games or 6 straight games. Yeah, he's got 6 straight games, or not 6 straight, but in 5 of his last 6 games, he has at least 3 touchdowns. Like Aaron Rodgers has just been playing so well. I'm not really worried about the Eagles' defense. I do like Aaron Rodgers at 6,800. You can obviously look to stack him up with Devonta Adams, and there are some good plays on the Eagles side that I do like. Miles Sanders, I think, is in a really good spot against Green Bay, against their run defense. Dallas Goedert, I think, is one of the better tight end plays overall this week. So I do like Aaron Rodgers quite a bit as well. Not much else, though, in the 6K range that really catches my eye. I think if you're stacking, like in tournaments, you could stack Kirk Cousins with one of his receivers, maybe run it back with like a James Robinson. I could see doing that in tournaments. Taysom Hill has shown a lot of rushing upside. He's got 2 rushing touchdowns in 2 straight games. Really good matchup once again against the Falcons. So if you wanted to go to him, I wouldn't mind that. Tannehill in a great game environment against Cleveland. Right now, this Cleveland-Tennessee game actually has the highest total on the slate. So I could see maybe stacking up Tannehill with A.J. Brown. But I don't see really any of these guys being like cash game consideration for me. I think if talking cash games, optimal plays, like I'm probably either playing up for Kyler or Watson, or I'm going to look to go cheap. And there are some good cheap QBs that I'm interested in this week. Not hearing much talk on Jared Goff, but I do like Jared Goff in tournaments. I think this Arizona Rams game is one that I'm definitely going to be overweight on. I could obviously see stacking up Goff with one of his 2 receivers, or even double stacking him with, Kupp and Woods, and then looking to run it back with like a DeAndre Hopkins, or looking to run it back with someone like Christian Kirk. Maybe we could go to Andy Isabella again if Larry Fitzgerald winds up out. Like there are some guys I like on both sides of this game. I think this game could go over the 48 total. Goff has not been great this year, without a doubt. I mean, he's been pretty bad overall, but he's shown somewhat of a ceiling, especially in games where they get behind. I don't know if that'll be the case here. They are favored in this game, but the upside's there for Jared Goff against this Arizona defense, one that I'm not too worried about. I like his receiving options. I like Kupp, and I like Robert Woods this week. Both are pretty affordable. In tournaments, I will definitely be looking to stack up Jared Goff with Kupp and Woods, especially Robert Woods. I think he's 5,900 on DK. That's a very intriguing price tag for Robert Woods. I think he is underpriced, coming off 2 straight games with double-digit targets. I do like Jared Goff a lot in tournaments, and then it's gross to say, but Mitchell Trubisky, 5,400. I think he is another value quarterback that does stand out this week. They've already announced that he's going to start once again, and he got the start last week, Sunday night against Green Bay. And for DFS, at least, he had a really good game, 242 yards, 3 touchdowns, finished with 21.78 DK points. It's a good matchup here at home against the Lions. We saw Trubisky start week 1 against the Lions, and he did have a really good game against them. 242 yards and 3 touchdowns, pretty much kind of a similar game as he had last week. Finished with 24 DK points week 1 against the Lions. I know David Montgomery is in a really good spot, and he's expected to get a lot of ownership this week. So in tournaments, you could definitely look to leverage off of David Montgomery and play Mitchell Trubisky, play some of his pass catchers. And, in the scenario that David Montgomery fails, it probably means that, he's not scoring touchdowns, and that means that Trubisky is scoring all the touchdowns. That, if let's say the Bears score 28 points, that Trubisky throws 4 touchdowns and David Montgomery doesn't have any. If you're playing Trubisky in tournaments, I think you probably want to fade David Montgomery in that case. I don't really see a scenario where I'd want to play Trubisky and Montgomery together. But I do like Trubisky this week. I like the spot for him. I like the cheap price tag. He's a guy that does have some sneaky rushing upside as well. At 5,400, he's another value quarterback that I'll be looking to. Him and Jared Goff, I think, are my 2 favorite guys, under 6K this week. It's my 2 favorite values overall. But let's go ahead and move on to the running back position. We'll talk about running back now. So, like most weeks, running back is a spot where I want to try and spend up. There's usually always good plays at the top, and that's once again the case this week. We got Dalvin Cook at home against the Jags for 9,500. Derrick Henry at home against the Browns for 9,200. 2 guys over 9K on Draftkings. So, looking at these 2 guys, I think both are really good plays this week. I really don't have any arguments against both. I guess the one argument you could make against Dalvin Cook, besides the price tag, is that there were some reports that they wanted to scale back his workload, that the coach said that they've been giving Cook a little bit too many touches. I know he's had some games with, he's had 32 or 30 plus touches, 32 touches in 2 of his last 3 games. He's been getting a very heavy workload this season. But, when it comes to coach speak, we see this happen so much. We see coaches come out and say, oh, yeah, we're going to limit this guy, and then they don't. They get their normal workload. We saw it be the case last week with Austin Eckler, his first game back from IR. There was reports that he was going to be limited, that he wasn't going to, receive his full workload, and he went out and got 20-something touches. A lot of times this coach speak, oh, we're going to limit our starters. A lot of times it doesn't really happen. I wouldn't really get too worried about that for a guy like Dalvin Cook. This is still one of the most efficient running backs in the league. We know this is a guy that just has so much touchdown equity, so much touchdown upside. If the Vikings get down to the goal line, they are handing it off to Dalvin Cook 3 straight times. I like Cook a lot at 9,500. It's a really good matchup. The Jags have not been able to stop the run this year. They've given up, I'm pretty sure, the 8th or 7th most fantasy points to running backs this season, at least, factoring in DraftKings scoring. Really good spot for Dalvin Cook. I like him a lot. Derrick Henry, I do have a lot of interest in as well. 9,200 against the Browns. Henry, look, this is a guy that it seems like whenever I play him, he sucks, and whenever I don't play him, he does well. I didn't play him last week. I didn't play him against Baltimore. I'm pretty sure I did play him, though. I know I played him 1 week, and he really disappointed. I know it was week 2 against Jacksonville. I played Henry, and he had 8 DraftKings points that week. It seems like whenever I play Derrick Henry, that's just when he has, his, games where he goes for 80 yards and no touchdowns, finishes with 8 fantasy points. So that's just your warning. It seems like whenever I do play Henry, he sucks, and I'm going to be playing him this week. But, it's a really good matchup. Cleveland, they've been better against the run this year than they have against the pass, but they've still been struggling as of late against the run. I know they're expected to get Myles Garrett back for this game. I don't know how much that really has an impact, though, on a guy like Derrick Henry, who at this point can just really eat against any defense. This is one of the better game environments of the week. 53.5 total. 5.5 point spread. Right now, the Titans are favored by 5.5 at home. We've seen in games where Henry is a home favorite, he just crushes. I like him a lot here against the Browns. I think he's going to be a guy I look to pay up for as well. If we look at Yahoo's pricing, I think that's where Derrick Henry looks the best. He's coming in $7 cheaper than Dalvin Cook. He's actually cheaper than Alvin Kamara as well. I do like Henry a lot at just $34 on Yahoo. I think given the savings, he's one of my favorite pay-up options at running back. You know, it's close on DraftKings. Him and Cook are so closely priced. I think I'd probably give the slight edge to Dalvin Cook, but either way, I will definitely have a good amount of exposure to both Henry and Cook. I'll be looking to stack those guys up, in game stacks. Whether you're stacking the Jacksonville passing game and you want to run it back with Cook, or even if you want to play Cousins and Cook together, I don't know if I would do that, but either way, I like Cook a lot, whether you're stacking or just want to play him as a one-off. Could definitely see stacking up, the Cleveland passing game, though, with maybe a guy like Baker Mayfield, Jarvis Landry, run it back with Derrick Henry. Like, that Cleveland-Tennessee game is one I'm for sure going to be stacking up this week. I do like Derrick Henry a lot. I like Cook a lot. Choosing between the two on DraftKings, given they're so closely priced, I think I'd rather play Cook. On Yahoo, though, where Henry's coming in at a bit of a discount, I think I'd rather go to Derrick Henry over there. But then looking in the 7K range, Nick Chubb, since coming back from injury, he's been awesome. 100-plus rushing yards in 3 straight games. We know this is a guy that has big-time upside. He's in the same game environment against, or in this matchup, or in this, great game environment, 53.5 total. I do like Nick Chubb here. I don't think I have as much interest in him as I do, Cook and Henry, but I don't mind Chubb in the 7K range. We need to keep an eye on the status of Josh Jacobs. I'm recording this video on Friday around noon Eastern time. We haven't gotten any updates on practice reports yet for Friday, but Jacobs has not practiced 2 straight days. He did not practice Wednesday. He did not practice on Thursday. Like, he has a legit shot to miss this week. If he plays, I think he's a fine option, but if he's out, we will talk about Devonta Booker, who would benefit in the case that Jacobs is out. James Robinson, in tournaments, I don't mind him. I don't think he's like a core play for me, but, in game stacks, if you're stacking up that Jacksonville-Minnesota game, maybe if you're stacking up Cousins and Thielen or Cousins and Jefferson, then you could run it back with a guy like James Robinson. I wouldn't mind doing that in tournaments, but I think like the optimal play, the guy that stands out the most for cash games, the guy I like the most, Austin Eckler, 7,100 at home against the Patriots. The Patriots, a solid defensive team, not the best matchup overall, but we saw last week, Eckler just got so many touches last week. He got 25 touches, 14 carries, 16 targets, got 11 receptions. Like, it is clear that Austin Eckler is going to be the workhorse running back for the Chargers. I know they said he wasn't going to receive a workhorse-type role in his first game back, but that obviously was not the case. He got 25 touches last week. I wouldn't expect much to change this week. We saw week 1 against Cincy. I think week 2 against KC. I can't remember I think Justin Herbert did start that game, but week 1 against Cincy, when Tyrod Taylor was the quarterback, we saw Eckler barely get targeted, just did not have a good game overall. And really, since Justin Herbert's taken over at quarterback since week 2, 18 for Eckler, 31 fantasy points. The Tampa Bay game, I'm pretty sure he got hurt in that game, so I'm not really looking at that one. But in the 3 full games that he's played with Justin Herbert at quarterback, 18, 31, and 23 DraftKings points for Austin Eckler. Like, he's going to get targeted. He's seen double-digit targets in 2 of his last 3 games that he's played in. We know this is one of the best pass-catching running backs in the league. He's going to get a workhorse-type role. I like Austin Eckler a lot at 7,100. I think he's one of the best plays in that 7K range. Definitely stands out. It's just one of my favorite plays overall at running back this week. And I do like him a lot on Yahoo. $27 over there. He's not a cheap play by any means. He's not like a crazy discount, but still, out of all those mid-range running backs, I think Eckler does look the best at $27. One of my favorite plays in that 7K range. But now getting down to like the 6K range, I talked about Miles Sanders earlier. Really good spot for him against this Green Bay team. Green Bay has been terrible against the run this year. They've allowed a ton of fantasy points to opposing running backs. If you want to stack up Aaron Rodgers and Devonta Adams, which I do like doing this week, you could look to run it back with a guy like Miles Sanders, who is in a very favorable matchup. I do like him in tournaments at 6,700. Scrolling down to the 5K range, we do have a couple guys I want to talk about here. So first off, if Josh Jacobs does not play, Devonta Booker, 5,500, I think becomes a very strong play overall. I would assume he sees a workhorse-type role. I don't know if they're going to use him like they do Jacobs. I don't know if he's going to get like 25 touches. But Booker has shown, he can handle a heavy workload. He's a guy that they will use in the passing game as well. He'll get 3 or 4 targets. He'll be their goal line back, I assume. If they get down to the goal line, Booker should be the guy that punches it in. I like him a lot at 5,500, assuming that Josh Jacobs does not play. We'll have to keep an eye on that heading up to Sunday. Like I said, I'm recording this video on Friday around noon Eastern time. We don't have the Raiders practice reports yet for Friday, But if Jacobs does not practice Friday, that probably means he's going to be out come Sunday, which would move Devontae Booker into that starting role. He is really, really cheap on Yahoo. I do want to talk about him over there. He's only $14. I think he would be probably one of the best value plays on the board, assuming that Jacobs does not play. So just keep an eye on that. And then at the same price tag, David Montgomery, $5,500. I know I talked about him being popular earlier. While he is expected to get a good amount of ownership this week, I think this is a guy that I still do want to have exposure to. Like, he's getting just massive volume right now. He's getting work in the passing game. He's really just getting the touches, and that's what we asked for, especially in a matchup against the Lions. 19, 20, 23, 17, 16 touches his last 4 games. Like, they're using him as their number one running back. He's clearly their workhorse guy. If they get down to the goal line, Montgomery should be the guy punching it in. They're big favorites in this game at home. I think they're favored by like 5 or 6 right now, if I'm not mistaken. Oh, they're only favored by 3, but still home favorites here. 24 implied team total for the Bears. Look, the Lions have just been terrible stopping the run. I'm pretty sure they've allowed like the 3rd or 4th most fantasy points to opposing running backs this season. The spot could not be better for David Montgomery. This is a guy that it seems like whenever I play him, he always sucks. But if there was ever a week for David Montgomery to really go off, to put up a ceiling game, I think it would be this week against this terrible Lions defense. So I do like David Montgomery a lot at $5,500. I don't think he's going to be a guy that I'm massively overweight on, but even though he will be popular, I still want to get a good amount of exposure to Montgomery. There are some pivots though in tournaments. If you're playing single entry and you want to fade Montgomery, you could obviously play Devontae Booker at the same price tag, who will come in, I'm sure, probably lower owned than Montgomery will. If Jacobs is out, that is a pivot that you could make. But since we don't know the status of Jacobs right now, I like Montgomery as a RB option in that 5K range. Booker though, really strong play as well if Jacobs winds up out. The Colts running backs, I don't really know what to do with the Colts running backs. You have Jonathan Taylor for I think he's $5,700. Yeah, Jonathan Taylor's $5,700. Nyheim Hines is $5,300. Taylor obviously did not play last week, but he's expected to play this week. It's a fantastic matchup. Houston is another team that has just been terrible against the run this year. I could see Taylor or Hines, one of those two guys, really putting up a ceiling game. But, good luck picking which one it's going to be. I think if you're playing a lot of tournament lineups, you probably want exposure to both Taylor and Hines, especially if you like stacking up that game. If you're stacking up Watson and one of his receivers, then you could run it back with Hines. You could run it back with Taylor, one of those two guys. Cash games, I don't think you're playing either one of those guys. But in tournaments, I would have some exposure to that Colts backfield because I could see a scenario, whether it's Taylor or Hines, one of those two guys putting up a ceiling game just because of how good the matchup is, how much Houston has struggled against the run this year. But I think that's really it for running back. Let's go ahead and move on to the wide receiver position and talk about wide receiver at the top. So you got Devonta Adams, most expensive option overall, to no surprise. He's $9K on Draftkings. I think he's $39 over on Yahoo. Yeah, $39 on Yahoo. Look, Devonta Adams is really expensive, but the dude's just been unstoppable this year. He's been about as good as it gets. You look at the game log, he's literally scored 18 Draftkings points in 5-6 straight games. He's just been so good. He's scoring a ton of touchdowns this year. He's got 6 straight games with at least one touchdown. I'm not worried about this Eagles secondary stopping him. Devonta Adams is matchup proof at this point. Nobody can guard this guy one-on-one. We know Aaron Rodgers is going to target Adams a ton. I do like Devonta Adams. It's just a matter of if you can fit him in. In cash games, I don't think you're playing Devonta Adams at 9K. I think, in cash, you're probably either going to go to Henry or Cook at that price tag. But in tournaments, I will definitely have Adams and Rodgers at stacks and then running it back with some guys on the Eagles side. I do like Adams a lot in tournaments. I think he is probably my favorite pay up receiver overall. And if we're talking, tournaments, paying up at receiver, he's a guy that I do like the most. Just in the in the 7K range though, I think if you want to go to A.J. Brown, it is a really good spot for him against this banged-up Cleveland secondary. Cleveland, just hasn't been able to stop the pass at all this year. They've really struggled overall just stopping receivers. So great spot for A.J. Brown, great game environment, high total. If you want to stack him and Tannehill, I could see doing that in tournaments. I don't mind that at all. Calvin Ridley, I played last week in cash games, and that was one of the plays that kind of came back to bite me. I know he didn't have the worst game overall, but compared to some of the other receivers in his price point, he disappointed compared to some of the other guys like Tyreek Hill, who smashed. I got burned on Ridley last week. We'll have to see if Julio returns this week. I think Julio did practice on Friday. We did get that update, so if Julio plays, I probably won't be looking to Ridley, but if Julio's out again, you could go to Calvin Ridley at $7,200. Just when Julio's out, it seems like Ridley just at least gives you 15, 20 DK points. Like he just has such a high floor when Julio's out. The ceiling is there as well. We know the targets are going to be there. So just keep an eye on the status of Julio. Like I said, though, he did practice on Friday, so we'll have to keep an eye on his status. He is very cheap, 6,600. Like if Julio does play, I mean, it's a it's a bad matchup against a pretty good Saints defense, but Julio is a matchup-proof receiver at this point. Like the dude's so talented. He's going to find ways to get open. It's a good game environment at home in the dome. You know, the total in this game isn't as high as I would expect, but if Julio plays, I think at 6,600, you could look to him in that 6K range. I think Allen Robinson is a very strong option in tournaments if you want to stack him up with Mitchell Trubisky. I think that does make a lot of sense, and that's not going to cost you too much salary either. Obviously, if you're pivoting off of David Montgomery, you know, stacking up Robinson and Trubisky is probably the best way to go. You know, we talked about the Rams receivers. I'm going to look to stack them up with Jared Goff in tournaments, Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods. Robert Woods is very affordable on DraftKings, only 5,900, Kupp 6,100. I think both those guys are very appealing plays in tournaments. But the guy that I really like in the 5K range, Brandon Cooks, definitely going to be looking to stack him up with Deshaun Watson. I wouldn't even mind doing that in cash games this week. I know Cooks is expected to be popular, but with no Will Fuller, with no Kenny Stills, with no Randall Cobb, like Brandon Cooks should just be looking at a ton of targets here. I mean, he's already been targeted pretty heavily this year, but now that he's going to be the number one receiver, I'm expecting close to double-digit targets for Cooks. I know the Colts have a good defense. They have a good secondary, but we know Deshaun Watson is going to throw the ball a ton. It's a great game environment. It's a high-total game. It's in a dome. I like Cooks a lot at 5,600. I think he's one of the better plays in the 5K range this week. I'm definitely going to be stacking him up with Watson. And if you look at Yahoo's pricing, Brandon Cooks is very affordable over there. Only $18. I think, you know, under $20, he looks like one of the best receiver plays overall this week. I know the ownership's going to be there, but still, I'm not going to be full fading Cooks. I am definitely going to have exposure to him. I think he is a very strong play overall this week. But other guys that we could look to maybe in that 5K range, like not much else stands out. You know, I think Jacoby Myers, if you want to look for someone to pivot or at least look for someone to run back with Austin Eckler lineups, like Jacoby Myers should see plenty of targets. I mean, the target volume's gone down the last few weeks, but still, when Cam drops back to throw, like Jacoby Myers is the guy that he's going to be looking to. So I don't mind Jacoby Myers at 5,500. You know, if we're talking about like cheap plays under 5K, there isn't much that stands out. You know, I think these Cincinnati receivers, I liked them last week and they kind of disappointed. Tyler Boyd still got targeted, I believe, 6 times. Yeah, 3 catches for 15 yards on 6 targets. Miami does have a really good defense, but you can attack them in the slot, so I don't mind Tyler Boyd at 4,700 as a value play. But I think one of the better values overall this week, you know, I'll be looking to double stack Deshaun Watson with Cooks and Coody. Kiki Coody, 3,500 on DraftKings. Looks like a really good value. And looking at Yahoo's pricing, you got Kiki coming in at minimum salary over there. I think he also looks like a very strong play over on Yahoo. I don't mind playing Cooks and Coody together with Deshaun Watson. I think, you know, if Watson throws for 350 yards and 4 touchdowns this week, like there's a good chance that he could maybe throw 1 to Cooks, 1 to Coody, or even 2 to Cooks and 2 to Coody. Like with no Fuller, with no Cobb, with no steals, I'm expecting Kiki Coody to act as the number 2 receiver or play as the number 2 receiver for the Texans. I don't know if he's going to be their outside receiver or if he's going to play in the slot, but either way, the target should be there. He's a guy that, you know, he's shown upside in the past. He did get a good amount of playing time last year, dealing with when some of their receivers were banged up. Hasn't played as much this season, but he's clearly their next best option behind Brandon Cooks, just in my opinion. And at 3,500, that is a really cheap price tag for Coody. Like, it's going to be very hard for him to fail at that salary. Like, even if he gets 5 catches for 50 yards, he's still giving you 10 fantasy points, which won't kill you at 3,500. And there's obviously upside for him to put up way more than that, especially given how cheap he is. Like, if he catches a touchdown, you're probably going to want to have him in tournaments because, you know, let's say Watson does put up a ceiling game again and throws for 4 touchdowns. Like I said earlier, I think it's very likely 1 goes to Coody, 1 goes to Cooks. If not, you know, one of those 2 guys maybe catches 2 touchdowns. I'm expecting Coody and Cooks to pretty much lead the team in targets. If I had to guess who sees the most targets out of all the Houston receivers, I think Cooks probably leads the team in targets, and then Coody will be right behind him. Those are the 2 guys I like most from the Houston passing game. You know, they have some other cheap guys you could look to target. Like, they do have Isaiah Coulter, who is really cheap. He's the minimum salary, $3K. I'm assuming he's going to play some this week as well. I don't really know who else they have, though, behind him. Like, there's no one else in the DK player pool besides Cooks, Coody, and Coulter. I don't know if they're going to be signing someone from the practice squad, if they're going to bring someone up from the practice squad, but if you want to go to Coulter in tournaments, you could do that. But I think cash games like Cooks, Coody, I wouldn't mind playing both those guys in cash games. And if you're doing that, you probably want to play Deshaun Watson as well. I like Watson a lot this week, and I'm definitely going to be looking to stack him up with some of his pass catchers. So that's just my thoughts there. There's some other 3K receivers that are in play, like Brashad Perriman for $3,900. I don't mind as a really cheap option. Keelan Cole, we'll have to see what happens with DJ Shark. I know Shark was out last week. I believe Laviska was out last week as well. Let me take a look at Jacksonville's receivers. I haven't been keeping up to date with him, but it looks like Shark is questionable. Looks like Laviska is going to play, or Conley. No, Laviska played last week. Conley was the one that was out. So it was Conley and Shark that were out last week. We'll have to see. If both those guys are out again, you can maybe go to Keelan Cole for $3,800. But really, my favorite punt plate receiver is definitely going to be Kiki Kuti at $3,500. So let's go ahead and move on to tight end. We'll hit on the tight end position just real quick before we do end the video. I think tight end's pretty straightforward for me. I don't know if I'm going to be paying up for Darren Waller. He burned me heavy last week. I was very heavy on him in a great spot against the Falcons, and he just completely shit the bed. Pretty much the entire Raiders passing game was terrible last week. It's a good spot again against the Jets. If you want to go to Darren Waller, I don't mind him at $6,100, but I really like some of these 4K options. Evan Ingram at $4,900 against the Seahawks, I like a lot. The Giants are big dogs in this game. They should be throwing a ton. I do like Evan Ingram. He finally kind of broke free last week, had a big game. 6 catches for 129 yards, 20 Draftkings points, was his best game of the season. I do like Evan Ingram at $4,900. Probably my favorite tight end overall is Dallas Goedert, $4,300. I know Zach Ertz is likely to return this week, but I'm not expecting Zach Ertz to really cut into Dallas Goedert's role. Goedert should still be probably their number one tight end. He's clearly their best pass-catching tight end at this point. Has seen 22 targets in their last 3 games. With Ertz coming back, I don't think he's going to lose that many targets either. They should probably run a lot of 2 tight end sets with both Goedert and Ertz on the field. At $4,300, as run backs with Aaron Rodgers and Devonta Adams stacks, I think Dallas Goedert looks like a really good value. I like him a lot at the tight end position. I think he's one of my favorite values overall at tight end. I don't mind a guy like Hayden Hurst, who just continues to see 6, 7, 8 targets pretty much every week. He's an every down tight end. You could definitely go to Hayden Hurst. It's a great matchup for Jonnu Smith against the Browns. The Browns have really struggled to defend tight ends this year, so if you want to go to him at $4,100, I could see going there. Robert Tonyan, he just continues to score touchdowns. He's got 2 games in a row with at least 1 touchdown, 5 targets in both those games. He's not going to see 12 targets. He's not going to see 8 targets, but you'll probably get 5 to 6 targets for Tonyan. They look to him a lot in the red zone as well, especially near the goal line. He's going to be touchdown dependent, but $3,700. If you need a value tight end, I do like Bob Tonyan at $3,700. I think he is probably one of the better punt plays overall under 4K. Now, I guess you could go to Kyle Rudolph as well if Irv Smith is out again. I actually liked Rudolph a lot last week with Smith and Thielen out. He did have a solid game, 7 catches for 68 yards on 8 targets. Obviously, with Thielen back, I don't know if he's going to see 8 targets again, but with Irv Smith maybe still out, you could probably see 5 to 6 targets for Kyle Rudolph. Could maybe be looked to a lot in the red zone. Could catch a touchdown. At $3,400, he's a punt tight end you could go to, but mainly a tight end for me is definitely Dallas Goedert, Evan Ingram, Hayden Hurst, Bob Tonyan. Those are probably my 4 favorite guys overall at the position. But yeah, guys, I think we covered tight end. I think we broke down the slate pretty much position by position, quarterback through tight end. Hit on all the plays that I'm really interested in for this week. So I hope you guys did enjoy this video. I do appreciate you watching. If you enjoyed, hit that like button before you do get out of here. Hit the subscribe button as well. Click the notification bell so that way you do get notified every time I upload. And if you really enjoy my videos and if they do help you out a lot and you want to get more content from me, feel free to check out my exclusive content, link down below on Patreon. If you really enjoy the videos and you want to see more that I have to offer, you can check out the Patreon link down below in the description. But best of luck this week, guys. Thank you so much for watching the video. I hope you did enjoy. We'll see you in the next one. Good luck this week. Peace.